Hello and welcome to Nbyula Talks. Before we begin, we have a few updates and reminders for you. We would love to have you be part of our Nbyula community. And you can do so by logging on to www.nbyula.com, where you can join communities related to your area of interest, register for upcoming Nbyula Talks, book one-to-one skylifts, and view other upcoming events. You can also take this opportunity to connect with fellow learners or the speaker by sending a connection request. When you connect with the speaker, you will be able to contact them directly as well as receive updates about their upcoming talks. Kindly note that during this session, you will not be able to switch on your camera or unmute your mic. To ask questions during the talk, go to the audience chat, type your question, and select Post your question. If your question has not been answered during the talk, you will be notified once it's been answered, or if your question has not been answered during the talk, you can go to www.nbyula.com and spin a quest, and your questions will be answered. Thank you for joining us today. We hope this talk broadens your horizons and takes you to new learning heights.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to our Nbyula Talk, and I'm your host for the day. And I'm so sorry for the delay. There were some technical issues, and we finally are on board. So I am a part of Nbyula editorial and engagement team, and today we have a very special guest with us from London. However, quickly I'll give you a review about our platform Nbyula, right? So Nbyula is a platform where we help all the international students or workers to eliminate all kinds of fears related to studying in a foreign land, and and at the same time it reduces so much of cost, efforts, and problems associated with international work and studies. All right, then, Arijit, it's time for your introduction. Quickly, let me tell something before that. So we always try to achieve something that is, in a distant future, we think that it might not be possible. But however, today's guest speaker, Arijit, has proven all of us wrong. And to know more about Rhodes Scholar, I think who better than Arijit himself as a Rhodes Scholar. All right, then, Arijit, can we just have a quick introduction first?
Hi, can you hear me all right? Yes. Okay, sorry. Okay, hello everyone. And as you see, we are in the session with just the right amount of bloopers for you guys to make memes with later on, which is always good for a session, makes the session more popular and gets you more views. So, so as I was saying, I was kind of wanting to give a brief introduction about the scholarship, about myself, and so on and so forth. But before that, so I would like to say that I'm currently sort of based here working as a scientist in the pharmaceutical industry, pretty much on AI for drug discovery and drug safety. And before this, I did a PhD at the University of Oxford. And there I primarily focused on machine learning for healthcare, specifically designing AI algorithms for, second trimester ultrasound video understanding. Now, this part, the PhD aspect of it, was actually funded through a Rhodes Scholarship, which is what this session is a bit about. And we'll be talking generally about what the Rhodes Scholarships are, how they have evolved over the years, and why it's worth actually giving a shot to what is one of the oldest scholarship programs still in existence in the world today. So as such, I'm assuming a lot of people would have heard about the Rhodes Scholarships because Rhodes Scholars in general, or the scholarship in particular, they have a habit of being controversial over the years. Sometimes good controversy, sometimes bad controversy, but the proper noun is somehow, they're in the back of a lot of people's minds. So generally, the scholarship is offered specifically at the University of Oxford by the Rhodes Trust. And this was founded in 1902 through the will of a gentleman known as Cecil Rhodes. Now, Mr. Rhodes was to put it mildly, was a very controversial figure in his lifetime. Did a lot of stuff in his short life, including sort of let's just say not very pleasant things. But at the end of his life, the fact that he created a will to set a scholarship like this surprised everyone, including his alma mater, Oriel College in Oxford. That how can someone donate so much money for creating an endowment in perpetuity? It was a fairly novel concept at the time. So the executors of the will, which included among other people Rudyard Kipling, who you have all heard of, and quite a few other of people who were his friends at the time, were responsible for setting up the actual scholarship. So the first Rhodes Scholars came to Oxford in 1903, and at the time, India was not one of the constituencies. It was mostly the US, Southern Africa, Germany, and a few other countries that were included. The first Indian Rhodes Scholars took residence after independence in 1948. So the first interviews happened in 1947 as India was about to be independent. And fast forward today, there are five Indian Rhodes Scholars who come in every year to study a range of subjects in Oxford for a period of 2 to 3 to sometimes 4 years. Generally, the scholarship covers tuition fees, living expenses, round trip airfare at the beginning and end of your course, and a few incidental expenses here and there. But the real value of the scholarship, as you realize, given the history of it, comes not from the actual academic support or some of the other more financial benefits that are associated with it, but in the legacy of it and the associated opportunities of like learning and development that you get by interacting with peers who are similarly qualified as to you, and through the fairly accomplished alumni base that you have. This alumni base includes quite a few people who have gone on to shape the world in their own ways, including individuals like Bill Clinton or individuals like Howard Florey, who was a Nobel laureate for discovery of penicillin, or sort of closer home people like Montek Singh Ahluwalia or people like Siddharth Mukherjee, who writes a lot of books about like sort of like generally what can be called as medical literature, stuff like the emperor of all maladies and so on and so forth. So as you see, like there it does open your window to a lot of doors that you don't even know exist. So that becomes a core benefit for a program like this. Now a lot of people also have associated the scholarship with a lot of the controversy, particularly the Rhodes name in recent years. But that in itself, I would say, is an opportunity to engage in discussions that you would not have otherwise, in terms of how legacies affect us today and how historically sort of like discriminated against populations can be reparated for the historical harms done to them. And these kind of conversations are very much on your mind when you are in a program like this. And that, I would say, somehow shapes us as people with some more understanding of how the world evolved around us, even if those are not part of our immediate academic inquiry. Say, for example, if you're an engineer, you would not normally deal with a topic like that, but nevertheless very relevant for your growth as a person and as an individual in society too. So this is basically the Rhodes Scholarships in a nutshell. And there are four criteria to that, which I'll discuss as we proceed the conversation forward.
Thank you so much, Arijit. I mean, that was quite informative. Also, I think you have covered most of that, but I think all the attendants, first of all, welcome to Nebula Talk and thank you so much for joining us today. To add more to your uh, perspective of Rhodes Scholarship, I would like also to highlight that Arijit here was selected around 2016. Out of 89 scholars, only five of them got selected. Am I right, Arijit?
So there were 89 scholars in the class of 2016 from around the world, and there are
Mm-hmm.
five scholars every year from India now. So
Mm-hmm.
five out of the 89 scholars would be from India.
Mm-hmm.
So the number 89 around the world is still it's still a quite a it's a small number, I would say.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I think that itself is quite commendable. And like, how did you manage? Like, what inspired you to apply for Rhodes Scholarship?
That's an interesting one. What inspired me to apply? So, I mean, okay, so I did not really give a very big introduction about myself, but generally, before going for Oxford for doing the PhD, I did my undergrad at IIT in Kharagpur. So I did my bachelor's and master's. It was a dual degree program in mechanical engineering, and I also did a minor in aerospace engineering at the time. So those years were pretty interesting, as in, like I don't have to describe what preparing for IIT is like, or everything around that. So nowadays you even have Netflix series. I think are about at least about what 5 6 of them that tackle this theme. So in case you want more information about that, Netflix is a better guide than I can be. But the upshot there was that uh, one of my friends who was in the 4 year program, like was in a BTech program. So if you're in a BTech program, you start in the same year, but you graduate 1 year early compared to somebody who is in a dual degree program because you also get a master's. So the final years of your friends and yourself are 1 year apart. So this person, he had applied for the scholarships 1 year before me. Now he had his own reasons to apply. He wanted to actually be a serious academic and things like that. I had none of those aspirations. I can barely think about my life more than 48 hours at a time. So I'm really bad at planning for the future. But what this person told me, that he made it to the final rounds of the interview, did not get it, but making it to the final rounds is itself a quite a big deal, as I will tell why that's the case later on. He said that the chairman of his interview panel was Rahul Dravid. And
Oh, wow.
one of the things about the Rhodes interview, in particular, the final interviews, is that you have a dinner with your panelists the night before the interview. This is a dinner where, as I realized later, every interviewer is asked to talk to every single participant and go to them and talk to them. Normally, I mean, to meet somebody like Rahul Dravid, you'd have to stand for hours in a line for an autograph. And I was like, wow, here I would go. If I can make it to that far, I would go for a dinner and these people would all come to me. Wow, let's apply for this. So
Oh,
that
wow.
was my immediate motivation to apply. Now, once this motivation was decided, I had to pick out suitable courses that I can at least write in my SOP that I really want to do that. So I had to actually work backwards, start evaluating what my passions are, blah blah blah. The whole thing, which most normal people would really organically do it from fairly early in their undergrad. So at the time, also had won another award known as the Honda Young Engineer and Scientist Awards. So the Honda
Mhm.
Foundation of Japan, through Honda in India, they administer a program known as Honda ES Awards for engineering students in particular. At the time, they're restricted to only about 7 IITs, like they're being really selective about it and are giving the awards to 14 students. This award
Mhm.
included, like, they paid you a lot of money. They paid you $3,000 upfront, and then $7,000 for internship in Japan, and so on and so forth. So overnight, I became super rich, and I still remember walking out of that dummy check in Shangri-La in Delhi and people giving looks. I felt really good about it as a broke student still then. Um, and the internship in Japan, however, that was interesting because I did it in energy systems, primarily in micro energy systems. And there, so a lot of the research that I did kind of inspired me to take similar kind of work in a laboratory in India. So I would take a bus from Kharagpur to Durgapur, which is a 5 hour journey, 4 hour journey, to work at the Central Mechanical Engineering Research Institute there, and also work on energy systems there. So there was a common thread that was emerging. Like, I could say that, I could see that there is a bit of a passion for working on energy transition, and boom, we had our Rhodes SOP right there. So I basically made a case for working on energy transition, environmental policy, and so on, which ties really well to my mechanical engineering background, etc. And then I applied. The application process itself was quite complicated in the sense that you needed a statement of purpose, you needed all your supporting documentation, you needed 6 references, which for Indians is the biggest pain point when applying for the roads. Now that number from has been reduced from 6 to 4 due to very
Mhm.
poor referee completion rates. So now there are 4 references required, but you also need an academic statement in addition to your personal statement. So that is a change that has happened more recently. So once I could actually sort this out, and by the way, the 6 references include 3 academic references and 3 character references. So that makes, that adds another layer of complexity because it's really difficult to explain what a character reference is to a lot of, like, Indian supervisors, or even in companies where you have interned, or your professors and so on. So I had to look up online about how the references are actually written and send those links to all my referees that, look, this is how a reference is ideally supposed to be written. Please do not do a to whom it may concern templated reference that you usually do. So it took a bit of work. But yeah, at the time I was hoping that maybe that will all pay off if I can make it to the final rounds of the interview. So that was still the motivation. There was no expectation of getting it. So yeah, okay. So with that motivation, went reached the final rounds. Rahul Dravid was not on the panel, and
Oh, damn.
most of the panelists were, well, I mean, they were very impressive people, no doubt, but not anyone that I would stand in a line to get an autograph from, but still very impressive people. And since there was no expectation of getting it, there was no expectation of performing in a certain way in the interviews. So I was very much my blunt own self. So I had zero pressure to perform or anything. So I just talked whatever came to my mind. So I think that in a way helped a lot because when you do that kind of a thing, you are very uninhibited, and that in
Mhm.
itself makes a lot of an impression, as I realized down the line. So when I got the scholarship that evening, I was stuck in a traffic jam in Bombay. After the interviews, it was in Mumbai at the time, in Lower Parel, in Aditya Birla's office, and I had gone off to my friend because I was like, "Milna to hai nahi, to chalo." Then that evening, I was like, okay, I mean, just for closure, let's just go for the results announcements. They give you a certificate that says that you reached the finals, which I'm told also has a lot of value for applying for other scholarships down the line, something I'll touch upon later. So I was like, chalo wahi le lete hain. And then I took a cab. I was stuck in a traffic. Then my friend called me saying that, यार तू कहाँ है? I'm like, भाई मैं अभी रास्ते में हूँ, ट्रैफिक में हूँ, यहाँ पे फंसा हुआ हूँ. मतलब तेरा हो गया, जल्दी आ. Like, wow, okay, what? So I reached there, and by the time the ceremonies were over, and the four other scholars who were selected that year were being given some pointers by the chairman of the committee at the time, which was Professor Virendra Chauhan. And I
Mhm.
walked in, I barged in, and I said, "Hello, everyone." It's like, yeah, okay, sit down. I think you have arrived right in time. So yeah, that's how it happened. And that night, I had to then think seriously about, okay, I got the scholarship now. Do I really want to do what I said I would do in my SOP? And then those conversations happened, and then things happened. And fast forward, what, 7 years now? This was on November 28th of 2015. So yeah, 7 years now. I have been through a PhD in Oxford. Have been working for 2 years. Got to do things that I had never imagined I would. Was a disappointment in some bits, but overall, like, yeah, it was a life less ordinary in a lot of ways. So yeah, that was kind of like my very unique motivations for applying for the scholarship.
Yeah. Thank you so much for that introduction. I mean, like, that wasn't a short introduction, but almost the entire history of yours. I mean, from the time you actually made your mind to meet Rahul Dravid and to the time you actually did not meet him and achieved Rhodes was amazing. Like, yeah. And I'm pretty sure your parents were also very proud and happy. Did they expect the same? Like from you, like, okay,
I did
you
not
will.
tell them. I did not tell them I was applying or I was going to Mumbai for an interview. I did not really tell any of this.
Oh, wow. And how did you, like, like it might be a balloon to like, okay, okay, I have a news and I am going to London. So how did they react to that?
Mm, they found out through Facebook actually. A lot of people kind of made a post that, oh, congratulations, etc., etc. You got this and all that. They found out through Facebook that this has happened. And then over the weekend, I told them, so this is the deal. And yeah, since I never had a plan for graduate studies per se, never had a future plan in mind. So
Mhm.
I had to do that planning actually, sort of settling down into that mode afterwards. Yeah,
Right,
but
right.
that's what happens when you don't really think about your future. I mean, if you live in the present, future
Right.
planning is complicated.
Yeah. Okay. Without further ado, I think we should start our session. And before that, all the attendees, I would like to say you anything that you want to ask, you can do it through the chat box. And if it is not answered during the session, it will be answered as a quest under the tab quest, of course. At nebula.com. All right, then. First question to you would be, what was the acceptance rate? I think you already told us that the very few people, like just 89 people, were selected throughout worldwide. But what is the data? Have you got any idea? Like, what is the acceptance rate right now?
So the estimated acceptance rate globally is about 0.7%. In the US, it's something like 1.4%, and it varies from country to country. In India, the numbers are a bit difficult to gauge because the application completion rate itself is quite low in India. Like when people see that they have to submit 4 references and all that, so that number varies a lot every year. But still, like everything else, India is a tougher country to qualify for anything. So you can imagine that the numbers would be lower than 0.7%. So yeah,
Right.
I would put it between 0.5 to 1%. So, but that's low acceptance rates are a part of life in India. So yeah.
But with that percentage, do you think that that will demotivate the students, or you think that should actually motivate them?
Look, I mean, my personal experience, to be blunt, is that really low selection rates, usually act as a demotivating factor because you think, ki, why not put my eggs in those baskets where the probability of success is higher? And that's a fair, rational, assumption to make. But what I would say is that specific to the roads or even similar opportunities, you should always give it a shot because the journey is worth as much as the destination is. Like the roads process, you get to meet so many amazing people. That's definitely worth it. You reach the final rounds. That counts as a brilliant point and a testament to your ability. So that makes you eminently qualified in the eyes of a lot of other future interview panels for scholarships. Like one observation that I made is that a lot of the people, like the friends that were in the, there are 18 people called for the final interview and five get it, right? So the other people who did not get that day, they all ended up getting some of the other scholarship, like a Felix or a Commonwealth or a Wedenfield or something like that, or an Inlax or something like that. Over the years, the fact that they were a Rhodes finalist helped them a lot, in a lot of other interview panels. So it is not a sunk cost, essentially. That's what I'm trying to say.
Right,
So
right.
that way, it's a good investment to make.
Yeah.
And also, like, there is this thing that Jitu says, right, in what Jitu Bhaiya says in Kota Factory, that you should do tough things, because if you do tough things at a really young age, that accustoms you to doing tough things down the line. So that kind of philosophy is kind of true for these kind of things.
Right. All right, then I think so. The next question I have for you is: did you apply for any other scholarship, or you just chose Rhodes because there was Rahul Dravid as a panelist?
I only chose Rhodes. I had no plans of studying in the UK as such initially. I mean, I did not really have a plan for future studies, but if I were to study, I'd probably go to the US like most other people. Uh, because for doing, sort of like, I was a mechanical engineer at the time. For doing higher studies in mechanical engineering, the UK is not the first place that comes to your mind. It's usually places like Germany or the US, etc. So, no, nothing apart from the roads.
Wow. All right. But you never had in your mind, okay, just in case if it is not Rhodes, it can be like Commonwealth or Chevening or maybe in Lax, you might have.
No,
No.
because the other applications, I mean, even though I was like, did not really plan much, but I still was convinced to apply to few other US grad schools. I applied to
Uh-huh.
MIT, Purdue, Stanford, and Carnegie Mellon. So I'd actually gotten offers from CMU and MIT at the time. So
Okay.
that way, if not Rhodes, it would have been some school in the States.
Right. So you had the funding and everything. Like if it was not a scholarship, your alternative funding was ready.
Yeah, I mean, like, because if you do a PhD in the States in a particularly good institution, then funding is not really a concern anyway. So that way, it was I did not have a lot of worries. Or, I mean, there are other options as well. I could have taken up a job and worked for 1 year or so, 2 years or so, and then thought about the future. So was not that worried about, like I said, I was not very particularly focused like a lot of my friends were. Ki graduate studies hi karna hai and all that. So that was a
Yeah. 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 I think for a lot of people, plan things work out. But with you, I think being more impromptu and spontaneous has really resulted greatly.
absolutely nothing that I have planned has ever worked out. So
Okay. All right. So, next question is: what is the selection criteria did you have to meet for the scholarship?
hmm. Okay, so for this, so the Rhodes scholarships have very specific criteria. There are four criteria. Now, originally, when Cecil Rhodes conceived the scholarship, he mentioned the criteria in his will, that these four need to be the criteria. And those were changed in 2018 to reflect a broader population and application aspiration, so on and so forth, and generally a change in how humanity has evolved. So, the original criteria, I'll very briefly recount these, that he did not want the scholarships to go to merely bookworms in his course, and he wanted the assessment to be made in four criteria. And you'd note something, that he originally meant it only for men. So it was his literary and scholastic attainments, his fondness for and success in manly outdoor sports such as cricket, football, and the like, his qualities of manhood, truth, courage, devotion to duty, sympathy for the protection of the weak, kindliness, unselfishness, and fellowship, and his exhibition during the school days of moral force of character and of instincts to lead and to take an interest in his schoolmates. For those latter attributes will be likely in afterlife to guide him to esteem in performance of public duty as his highest aim. So these four were the exact words that Cecil Rhodes used in his will. Now, of course, like, we know that women were admitted to the scholarship through an act of parliament in 1977, and a lot of these criteria were reinterpreted over the years for obvious reasons. The current criteria, which were agreed upon in 2018, reads something like, there are four criteria. One, literary and scholastic attainments, energy to use one's talents to the full, truth, courage, devotion to duty, sympathy for and protection of the weak, kindliness, unselfishness, and fellowship. And fourth, the moral force of character and instincts to lead, to take an interest in one's fellow beings. So these are four criteria. And what I can tell you is that each of these criteria have been interpreted in great amount of detail. So I was also a selector for the scholarships this year for the global constituency. So I actually had the scoring matrix. So there are sort of like levels of judgment within each of these criteria, and there are quite a lot of guidelines on how to interpret individual performance in each of these criteria. Academic and scholastic attainments, that's fairly obvious because okay, you had great grades in undergrad or in your masters, you probably published research, went out of your, sort of exceeded the expectations in whatever academic degree you were doing, or or exceeded that in other forms. So that's pretty much obvious. Literary and scholastic attainments, okay, maybe if you have written a book, great. Or maybe you're a contributor to a newspaper, or you have a history of like other kinds of scholastic attainment. There is no limit on what this can be. One of the past Indian scholars that I remember as an example of, this person used to and had a made for himself name for himself by translating a lot of modern Hindi literature into Swahili. So that was something that not a lot of people did. So in a way, he distinguished himself. Then the other two criteria, moral force of character, devotion to duty, etc., those are a lot more difficult to judge. Normally, your interest in your fellow beings, that can be expressed through a lot of ways, and it is very open to interpretation as what this can be. So yeah, very
Oh,
simple criteria, just a little more than other scholarships. Yeah.
yeah. Okay. That was, you said four criteria, right? Altogether. And what was like the application process? Like including like the form, the application form, the visa, and everything.
Well, the application process, that does change over the years. And for India, the application process, when I applied, it required you to submit a statement of purpose, give some scans of your other documents like passports, etc. For so the rule in India is that only Indian citizens can apply. Like you have to hold an Indian passport at the time of application. This may not be the rule in some other countries. Say, for example, if someone here is from, let's say, some other country where this rule may not apply, they hold an Indian passport but a residency card of that country, they can probably apply for that country as well. So this varies from country to country. Uh, Apart from the statement of purpose, you submit a resume, you submit email IDs of six, now it's four referees. These days, you also submit a separate academic statement as well. So that's sort of a application form that you fill kind of. If selected at this stage, you are called for round one interviews. Now, round one interviews typically in an offline setting would happen in 3 or 4 cities across the country. About 100, people are called for these. And then you have a round two interview, the final interview. About 18 to 20 people are called for this, either in Delhi or Mumbai. And from there, you select 5 people. Sometimes you also have a round three interview or a round zero interview, so to speak, where you do a purely technical interview on a slightly expanded set of people. So it's very simple. Now the actual interviews, I mean, it's a bit like questions can be from anything under the sun. That's meant to assess you on these four criteria. So there is no point preparing for it, or in no point describing me how to anticipate questions.
Right, right. But did you prepare in a certain way, or did you have any kind of help or mentor guiding you through all of these processes?
So I had reached out to people, like particularly other people from different IITs who had succeeded in the process, because we have a fairly unique sort of curriculum and unique sort of educational upbringing, so to speak. So how that part works and all that, but most of this guidance was confined to them giving details about what is expected and what is not and things like that. I did not really do any interview practices or anything like that, because the way the interviews are conducted is so open ended. There is no real point doing extensive practices.
Right, right, correct. But there are certain information like, okay, if you need help with the resume or the application itself, did you have anyone guiding you through that?
Not really, no. I had sort of reached out to people and had sort of like sent them my SOP and asked for like, okay, does it look good? So there was some guidance in that front that okay, maybe this sentence here is wrong, etc. You are giving too much detail and all that, but nothing specific to the roads. I mean, it was a fairly standard set of like, general sort of SOP correction pointers and so on and so forth.
Yeah. So I wanted to highlight this point that we at Nebula, we have experts who can give guidance to all of the students who wants to study at UK or anything related to the scholarship. If they need help, they can find mentors or alumni of Rhodes Scholarship and everyone at our platform, and we can have like one-on-one sessions with them to maybe review your application or SOP or anything related to that. So if you want to reach out to us, please watch till the end and I will give you more details about it. Okay. So what did you choose to study at the university and why?
So I sort of like started with a PhD in engineering science, and originally I had started working on developing models for understanding fluid dynamics in tidal power stations. After about 2.5 months of that, I changed my PhD to looking into machine learning for healthcare, because healthcare as a theme really appealed to me at the time. And I sort of started working on developing video understanding algorithms using deep learning for second trimester ultrasound video analysis. So obviously this was a PhD, so the thesis is that specific, but generally it was about sort of like building better ways of doing automated diagnosis of anomalies that might show up in a second trimester scan during pregnancies. So building those algorithms that can understand ultrasound videos and images, but doing a variety of things. In the second trimester, you typically do things like you do fetal biometry, you sort of measure the head circumference, the abdominal circumference, the femur length. You look for signs of like congenital heart anomalies. You look for sort of like other kinds of like growth issues, etc. So
Mhm.
the PhD was supposed to build a lot of these AI pipelines that can do these sonography workflows and help the sonographer become more efficient. So that was roughly the overarching theme.
Wow, that was quite an interesting theme that you selected. I mean, did you have a certain reason to select that, or you just had to, or is there anything in your mind while you chose that?
Look, I mean, like I said, I'm not good at planning for the future, right? So within the 48 hours that I made this selection, that appealed to me. And then I lived on with it.
Wow,
And
but
that has
it's
been
quite interesting.
very rewarding.
I mean, it's very fascinating too. I mean, I would like to know more about it, maybe later.
I mean, like you can actually look me up on YouTube. I've given quite a few talks on the topic. So if you look me up on YouTube or Google me up, you'll find a lot of these talks and podcasts that I've done.
Right, right. Okay, then. Uh, as you said, you had an internship in Japan, right?
Yep.
This was before the scholarship, I believe.
Yeah. This was during my
Yeah,
BTech, yeah.
yeah. Do you think that also impacted you attaining Rhodes Scholarship somehow?
Definitely. Definitely. This was my first
Right.
time abroad in a in a foreign country though. So that did shape me up as a person in more ways than one.
Uh-huh.
So normally, like when you live for 3 months in a country outside your home, particularly if you're living in Japan, you know, which is culturally quite different from what you are used to in India, that
Very. Mhm.
at a very formative age shapes you up as a person like nothing else. So those experiences come up. And actually the Honda Yes, the presence of Honda Yes on the CV, that was also a very strong signal there, because that
Mhm.
award is also given for criteria that are fairly similar to Rhodes. So
Right,
that is also there.
right, right. So you did your BTech and then your MTech
Yeah, it was a dual
post.
degree.
Right, 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 right. Okay. So did you face any challenges while you were at UK and you would like to help our aspirants like to reduce those issues or obstacles?
Mhm.
Yeah.
No, I mean, look, I think the challenges as far as living in the UK is concerned primarily concern adjusting to the weather, the food. The food sucks here, to put it mildly. And but none of this is news. The weather and the food of the UK are legendary, and all the memes about it that you see. But generally, I think like the UK as a culture is quite similar to what you are used to in a lot of ways, and it's different in some ways. But generally, you would not face particular challenges of adjusting to a foreign land as much in the UK as in a lot of other places. Like compared to Japan, for example, UK is a lot closer home, so to speak, not by distance, but
Right.
generally in terms of the cultural understanding and also
Mhm.
the language. So you speak English. This everyone speaks English, so which is good. One thing that does happen is that particularly like if you are in a university that is not very well ranked in the UK,
Mhm.
there is a constant worry about securing your post university career.
Mhm.
The Now the visa rules are a lot more streamlined in that regard, that you are entitled to a graduate sort of work visa for 2 years after your degree. But at the time I came, that was not the case. Unless you secured employment within a very small grace period after your degree, you'd have to make very quick decisions of where to move next. Which I mean,
Right.
from the UK's perspective, is obviously fair. Like students come to study, they go back home and they live their lives at home and some other place. And if they find an employer here, they come here. But from the individual student's perspective, making that kind of a plan in a very short time is quite stressful. So that's one of the key challenges that a lot of people faced at the time. Not necessarily applicable for a PhD because you have a much longer time to do all that. But a lot of master's courses are for 1 year in the UK. Some are even 9 months. That 1 year boils down to 9 months. So sometimes it becomes a very short time to think about your future. You do that while adjusting to a still a foreign land, a different weather, and different style of existence, and
Yeah.
while adjusting to a new way of teaching and so on and so forth. But otherwise, apart from that, not very particular challenges as such. It's very standard student challenges like everywhere else.
Right. Okay. Did were there any language barriers? Like I'm like UK English is like very different from what we speak here.
No, not really. As in, like, we speak a fairly understandable English, to be honest.
Right.
The Brits speak a fairly understandable English as well, depending on where you are. But generally, one thing you have to realize, and this is something I should highlight, that a lot of people think that so you need to probably speak in some kind of a British accent when you're in the UK. But what you call as the British accent, or what you conventionally understand as the British accent, is essentially sort of a southern UK, specifically a South London kind of an accent. So that in itself is not the accent in most places in the UK. So there are close to about 100 different accents in which English is spoken within the within this country itself. So that way, the accent that you speak in is as valid as any other way of speaking English. So not to worry too much about all that.
Right. Other than the food, the language, how did you commute to your university, like from where you stay?
So Oxford in particular, the university is spread out across the town of Oxford. There isn't a specific university campus.
Mm-hmm.
So, you can choose your accommodation accordingly if you really want to stay close to your department. But that in itself is not necessary. You can bike to work, you can walk to work, you can take a bus to work. The most popular choice is actually biking and walking. Bikes get stolen very regularly, so that's a bit of a problem. But otherwise, yeah, mostly biking and walking to work.
Okay. All right. Um, Next question is, how has your career developed after studying at Oxford University?
Right. So during my time at Oxford, because I was doing a PhD in AI and machine learning and all that, so that was it was kind of like a breadth skill that whose need was emerging. So I used to work part time at different points in Shell in London. So that gave me a fair amount of pocket money to travel around the world, which was the primary benefit. The secondary benefit was that it exposed me to industrial problem statements and that were not healthcare related. So kind of diversified my portfolio. I did an internship at Microsoft Research in the Cambridge lab, and there I worked on sort of like healthcare intelligence, as Microsoft is also investing heavily in AI for healthcare. And then after my PhD, I submitted my thesis about 2 days before the first lockdown. So it was a fairly interesting time to be looking for a job, and my job offers evaporated overnight. But anyway, that in itself was quite a time, which I don't want to live right now. So I got my job with AstraZeneca in the middle of the pandemic. I joined AstraZeneca in August of 2020, worked on a lot of different, very exciting projects. I'm not sure if I would ever be able to work on something as impactful as I worked there, because,
Mm-hmm.
AstraZeneca worked on the COVID vaccine and so on and so forth. And I stayed in AstraZeneca for a while. Then I joined another pharma company called UCB more recently, where I'm a senior principal scientist now. So overall, have been working generally still in the AI for healthcare field, and working primarily on developing novel machine learning solutions for drug discovery, drug safety, pharmacovigilance, patient data analytics, and so on and so forth. So quite a bit of a departure from what I was doing maybe 7, 8 years back, like working on CFD simulations and fluid dynamics and so on.
Yeah.
But still, yeah.
I mean, you had a quite a journey, and I think all of this resulted because you were spontaneous, and you are right now. I can say from my perspective, you're very successful and doing really good in your life, and that was only possible because You just took up what was the next opportunity that came to your way and you just took it.
Yeah, I mean, thinking too much has never worked for me. It has only given me migraine.
That's not a good sign, but okay. All right. All right, then, attendees, I think we can start with your questions. And I hope I have covered most of it, but let's see what we have today. Okay. Ria has asked, what's live at Oxford University like?
Yeah, it's quite a magical life in a way, and there are less glamorous aspects to it as well. But given that this is a podcast, let's talk about the glamorous aspects first. So the university itself, like the buildings, as you see, I mean, the university is the oldest university in the English-speaking world, and the place, as a result, it looks like straight out of a place from a fairy tale. Particularly on those rare days it snows. Now, I cannot really show pictures here. I mean, I'm not sure if I can, but generally, like a picture could have spoken more than
You
1,000
can.
words here.
You can
Yeah,
absolutely. You can share your screen.
yeah. I mean, okay, maybe if there is time at the end, I will try to do that. But generally, you get a
Sure.
lot of, there is a lot of content online where you get a lot of, the glimpses of what the place actually looks like. Quite a few Bollywood movies have been shot here, in fact. Like
Yep.
so. Yeah, I mean, so there is that, and you do have a lot of these cultural quirks in the university itself. Like, you kind of dress in a unique attire when you do your matriculation and graduation. You pretty much dress like a penguin, I would say. Like, you sort of have to wear what is known as a subfusk on top of black coats and things like that. So, if you have seen Harry Potter, like if you have seen the way that they wear robes, it's kind of similar to that. Speaking of
Oh,
Harry
wow.
Potter, a lot of the scenes in the movie were shot here in Oxford. So,
Right, right.
like there is a very strong tradition of formal dinners in Oxford where you dress in that particular way and go for dinners in these old college halls. So these are halls from the 1500s and sometimes older than that. And you're
Yeah.
dining. Now, a lot of halls do electric lights, but some still do candlelight sort of dinners.
Oh,
So, like those kind of like very unique experiences are specific to Oxford and Cambridge in some places. And then there is this other thing that because it's a really big university and there is a very strong diversity of people, so it's possible to meet people from all the 197 or 198 countries, depending on how you count, in one place, in one city. It
right.
is eminently possible that you would meet somebody from some country around the world because of the sheer diversity of the people that come here. So there is that, and then the number of student societies that forms as a result. I mean, there is a actually like one of the first events that I participated in was actually in a Quidditch match. So there is Oxford University Quidditch Society, just to give an example. So there is those kind of like very strong, diversified sort of academic growth in a environment that is has not changed much since maybe the 1500s. The city looks like straight out of a like a middle ages novel. That's the glamorous part of it. Less glamorous parts. One, the town is very expensive. Oxford is very expensive. Like it's probably the second most expensive place in the UK after London. Uh, but most scholarships, stipends, etc., give you the bare minimum that you need to survive. You can't really live a very lavish life on that. Not saying that you need to, but sometimes things do get expensive, right? There is that. Then, of course, I talked about the weather. I mean, that's something that does take a bit to get used to. It rains a lot. A lot of English proverbs like "stitch in time saves nine" or things like "make hay while the sun shines" makes a lot of sense when you encounter the weather. That why those proverbs came about. Then there is obviously you do have a concern of elitism. Like historically, the university has attracted people from a certain class and a certain background, which has created a very classist society uh, in this part of the world, and that is being challenged. Of course, like the university is making efforts to redress that and expand the pool of applicants and both admits and so on and so forth. And also, that's less of an issue in a post grad context. So there is that, and also like there is the issue that it's a fairly it's like people come from all kinds of places, right? So the cultural spectrum is really broad, but that is the least of your concerns because if you live in India, you're used to broad cultural spectrums anyway.
Absolutely. Yeah. And other than, I think, the monetary benefits, what else did Oxford give you?
It gave me a life less ordinary. I mean, gave me opportunities that are very hard to find. Gave me my first few experiences with some unpleasant things that I'll not talk about today. And also gave
Okay.
me the means to counter those, most importantly. So yeah, it was a
Wow.
very 360-degree experience. Uh,
Yeah.
Generally, yeah, I mean, it made me broaden my horizons, made me the world traveler. So after coming to the UK, I went to about 60 countries so far. Like, that's the kind of a sort of a window to the world that it opened for me. And also, like, the scholarship itself involved a lot of these opportunities where you could go to countries, meet their heads of states, their politicians, or sort of like eminent people in their field and so on. Generally, a lot of the Oxford Union debates introduced me to like viewpoints from movers and shakers of the world, presidents, prime ministers, novelists, Nobel laureates, everything, and seeing them in close proximity, specific to the scholarship, specific to the Rhodes, that introduced to a lot of, let's just say a lot of famous people that you read about in news who have really gone on to change the world, got these opportunities to interact with them from very close quarters, dinners with them, and so on and so forth. Overall, like, as you can see, a very unique learning experience from people who have gone on to shape the world. So yeah, overall, quite a few things.
Yeah. That's great. Someone has also asked what are the expenses covered under the Rhodes Scholarship? Maybe like pointers you can give, like what are expenses?
For an updated list, I would encourage you to check the website. That kind of details what is exactly covered at current times, but generally, tuition, living expenses, round trip airfare for the beginning and end of your course, and a few other expenses like research grants and initial settling grants, etc. In some cases, the visa costs and the healthcare, the insurance costs are also reimbursed. So there are few things here and there. You do get like sort of reimbursement for the final round interview travel as well. So I traveled from Kharagpur to Mumbai. I got some money that reimbursed that as well.
Well, that's great. I think to add to more to that question, we also have what is the stipend that is provided under the scholarship?
Well, I'll have to check the number. I mean, I'm not very sure what the current stipend is, but I believe something around, I don't know, between 16 to 18,000 pounds per annum, I guess. I'm not very sure of that, and the stipend is not taxed, so you get all of it. Yeah, but you
That's
need,
great.
yeah, you can check this number once again, like on the website.
So you also mentioned that while studying there, you were doing part-time job.
Yes, so typically the student visa in the UK allows you to work 20 hours a week, subject to other conditions like approval from, maybe other stakeholders, etc. But in my case, yeah, I did not continuously work part time. I worked at in bits and pieces at different points in time. Like, so I met some people from Shell, in conferences and other places, and they sort of needed someone to do some AI and advanced analytics, and so that became a good opportunity. Like, for working 20 hours at different points, and the pay was really good as well, gave industry exposure. So I took that up. A lot of my friends, they worked part time in, sometimes a lot of colleges have opportunities in terms of grading and teaching or lab demonstrations, which I have done teaching and lab demos as well. And
Right.
then you have other opportunities from different university organizations, not necessarily the academic parts of it. Something like serving as a research assistant for some lab, etc. Sometimes you can work part time in different shops and bars as well. So a lot of people do that. And then you have other forms of opportunities, which kind of become a bit contentious, like private tutoring and all that, because like, the taxability of those things need to be considered as well. Like, you are not allowed to be self-employed, but
Yeah,
opportunities, getting part-time work is not that much of an issue.
right. I think yeah, that's answer that is a great answer. Also, if just in case, I mean, I think the stipend is really good, and not a lot of students will face with the expenses. However, but it is also great that if someone is working, they're getting to explore the country and get a lot of exposure, and that is also in hand. You know, they get to know about the culture and everything.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah. Okay, I think one more question I have for you, and it's the last one. Does every Rhodes Scholar get his or her name featured on the list of Rhodes Scholar page on Wikipedia?
No, I mean, like, first of all, what I've realized is that Wikipedia pages are fairly easy to create and anybody can create about anybody. But look, at the end of the day, what I can tell you is that the scholarship is just a means to an end. That in
Mhm.
itself is not gonna, make you kind of like a celebrity or a leader or anything. It's something that you'll still work really hard towards. And it's just a means to an end. And people have done really, have done very inspiring work, obviously. For example, like let's talk some Indian Rhodes Scholars examples.
Mhm.
Like, for example, people like say Menka Guruswamy. So
Mhm.
for those who don't know, Menka Guruswamy and her partner, if I'm not wrong, so in uh, Arundhati Kaju, they were one of the some of the lawyers who represented Pravriti in the Article 377 case, and you know, so that was a very landmark judgment, right? I'm not a lawyer,
Right.
so I'm missing on the specifics, but generally, I mean, come to think about that, they
Right.
Menka had gotten the Rhodes scholarships, did very well in her BCL and her degrees in Oxford, could have taken up a job and lived a hotshot life of a lawyer, but chose to go back to India and work from the grassroots and make meaningful change. And you
Mhm.
can read the details actually on a Wikipedia page, to so to speak. You have, say, for
Mhm.
example, people like Sanjeev Sanyal who are doing phenomenal work in, sort of like in the government of India, sort of guiding the next generation of India's economic transformations. Then you had people like Montek Singh Ahluwalia who redefined what, sort of the idea of planning meant in India. So those are fairly inspiring examples. Like the scholarship was a means to an end for them probably, but they still worked very
Right.
hard to make real change.
Absolutely. Okay. Also, I wanted to ask you, is IELTS necessary for the university?
Right. So the thing is that a lot of these, actual rules around sort of what the requirements are for studying the UK in general, they undergo changes every year. So this is something that you'll have to check at current time because ये सब बहुत जल्दी change होता है जैसा मैंने देखा है. IELTS specifically, yeah, I mean, what I remember is that at the time the university had an option to waive off your English requirements entirely if your previous education was in English. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. And both IELTS and TOEFL scores are accepted. I had submitted a TOEFL score actually. So yeah, but generally I think one of these English tests are typically required for a lot of universities in the UK.
Right. Right.
But
Okay.
do check
I
out this.
think,
Do check this. I mean, don't count me on this. Do check this because these things change really fast.
yeah, yeah, yeah. All right, then I think we have come to the end of the session today. And thank you so much for joining us, Arijit, and all the attendees. But before we go, I think, Arijit, would you like to say something inspiring to all of the attendees today who wants to study and work in UK?
No, I mean, I cannot say anything much inspiring. I'm not that kind of an inspiring person, as you see. I mean, but yeah, generally, like I said, I mean, don't think too much. There is no point thinking too much. I mean, unless you are really good at doing that. So, for inspiring people, etc., I mean, you can go for the Wikipedia list of Rhodes Scholars, a lot of inspiring people there. I'm not on that list, so I'm not particularly inspiring anyway. But yeah, if you do want to reach out to me, I think my email ID is, I'm not sure if it is displayed or anything, or there is the profile that is created here. Yeah, I might be able to help in some
Yeah.
ways. So that is for specific questions. And by the way, I mean, like, if you have any last questions, just shoot them right now. As in, I don't have anything much inspiring to say.
I think you are saying that you are not inspiring, but however, with your journey, I think we find it very inspiring when we see you.
That's great.
Someone from India going there and making a name and doing something for a cause. And it's great, not just because the university, but the cause and the efforts that you have done, their hard work and everything. All of that matters a lot.
Yeah, I think, like, one thing that I can say, like, since you pointed that out, like, a lot of Indians go abroad every year. The number is increasing year on year, and it's nothing out of the ordinary anymore. And like, if you want to do that, if you want to study outside India, experience a different culture, now is the time to do it. Doesn't get any better. So yeah, just take the shot, and just the world is your oyster. So yeah, just live up to that. I mean, you have like people like sort of like Masum here, and others at Nybula and other places who can guide you to that end as well. So
Thank you so much, Arijit, for saying that. And all the attendees, please feel free to reach out to us for any queries related to study in UK or the Rhodes Scholarship or any other kind of mentorship that you need. please go on to nebula.com and all of the details will be there. All right, then, Arijit, thank you so much. I know it's pretty early there, and I kind of like felt like I'm waking you up in the middle of the morning, but that's all right. I think this is quite helpful for the all the aspirants to know, and like it's like a first-hand experience for them to understand, and who better than someone who actually has experienced that kind of a thing. So thank you so much, Arijit, and I'll see you later then.
Okay, see you everyone soon. Thanks for coming and attending the talk. Okay, bye bye.
Bye, attendees. Bye, bye,
Good
Skilligins.
day,
Take
everyone.
care.